You know that calendar on your wall or the one on your phone? Yeah, we take it completely for granted. But what if I told you it's one of the most incredible inventions ever? Seriously, it's our answer to this huge cosmic puzzle. How do you track time when the universe just refuses to play by our rules and use nice, even numbers? All right, let's get into it. So, what's the big deal? Why is it so hard to make a calendar that actually works? I mean, this is a problem that had the smartest people on Earth scratching their heads for thousands of years. And the answer? Well, it all comes down to this kind of clumsy, awkward dance between the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the main cosmic problem. Then, we'll see how early civilizations tried chasing either the sun or the moon. We'll look at the clever ways they tried to bridge that gap, how we eventually perfected the solar year, and finally, we'll check out the amazing variety of calendars that are still being used right now. All right, let's dive right into the problem itself. At its core, this whole thing is a clash. It's our very human need for neat, tidy systems versus nature's, well, let's just say its math is beautifully messy. So first things first, what even is a calendar? Super simple, right? It's just a system for organizing days. We're talking about giving names to chunks of time, days, weeks, months, years, so we all have a shared way of looking at things. You could even call it a technology, a tool for agreeing on what's next and remembering what already happened. But here's the real puzzle, the thing that drove people crazy for centuries. How do you get our nice, neat human system to sync up with the two giant clocks we have in the sky? You've got the sun, which controls the seasons, and the moon, which controls the tides. And the big problem? They're not running on the same schedule. Not even close. And this is where all the trouble starts. Get ready for our first awkward number. A solar year. The time it takes for the Earth to make one full trip around the sun, it's not a nice round 365 days. Nope. It's actually 365.2422 days. And that tiny little decimal, that extra bit of a day, that's the thing that has caused so many headaches throughout history. And then you've got awkward number 2. A lunar month, the time it takes the moon to go through all its phases, is about 29.5 days. Now, if you multiply that by 12, you get 354 days. That's a full 11 days shorter than a solar year. The math just doesn't work. The numbers just refuse to line up neatly. So what on earth did our ancestors do about it? Well, they basically split into two camps. Some people said, let's just follow the sun, and others said, nope, we're sticking with the moon. And just like that, you get the first two major types of calendars. See, it was all about a trade-off. You had to pick your poison, basically. You could go with a solar calendar, like the ancient Egyptians did. This was awesome for farmers, right? Because it stayed perfectly in sync with the seasons. The only problem was, what do you do with that annoying extra quarter of a day every single year? On the other hand, you could just follow the moon. A purely lunar calendar, like the Islamic Hijri calendar, is fantastic for tracking the moon's phases. But, and this is a big but, it drifts. It falls behind the seasons by about 11 days every year. Now, having your calendar just drift away from the seasons, that was a massive problem for a lot of societies. Think about it. It messes up farming. It messes up religious festivals. It's a big deal. So the next great idea, the next big innovation, was to figure out a way to build a bridge between the sun and the moon. And the brilliant tool they came up with to build that bridge has this amazing kind of nerdy name, intercalation. So what is intercalation? It's basically just a scheduled course correction. It's the fancy official term for sticking an extra day, or sometimes a whole extra month, into the calendar every now and then. It's the brilliant little hack that lets you keep your lunar months while also making sure your calendar doesn't get totally out of whack with the seasons. And this idea led to a really clever solution, the luni-solar calendar. These are like the best of both worlds option. They use months based on the moon, but then every few years, bam, they just slot in an entire extra month to get back in sync with the sun. This was absolutely critical for making sure important seasonal holidays, like a harvest festival, actually happened in the right season. You can see this elegant solution in action in the Hebrew, Hindu, and traditional Chinese calendars. But the calendar that most of us use today, it took a totally different route. The goal here wasn't about mixing the sun and the moon. It was about one thing, creating the most accurate, most precise solar calendar humanly possible. And that's the story of how we got the Gregorian calendar. So the story starts back with the early Romans, and their calendar was frankly a total mess. And get this, part of the reason was that politicians would literally mess with it just to make their term in office longer. So the first real fix comes in 46 BC with Julius Caesar. He brings in his astronomers and they create the Julian calendar. The rule was simple and brilliant. Just add one leap day every 4 years. It was a huge improvement, but it still wasn't perfect. Over the centuries, that tiny little error added up. By the 1500s, the calendar was off by 10 whole days. So in 1582, Pope Gregory XIII steps in to make one final, super precise adjustment. And I want you to really think about how tiny this fix was. The Julian calendar was already incredibly accurate. We're talking 99.998% accurate. The Gregorian reform, the one we all use now, was a correction of just 0.002%. That's it. It's just a perfect example of how obsessed we've become with getting the numbers exactly right when it comes to the cosmos. So, okay, the Gregorian calendar eventually becomes the big international standard, but it's so important to remember that it is not the only game in town. Not by a long shot. The world is still this incredible patchwork of different ways of tracking time. And you can see this all over the place. Sure, we have the Gregorian calendar for international business, but for billions of people, their religious life is guided by calendars like the Islamic Hijri calendar. You've got entire nations like Iran that use their own official calendar for civil life. And then you get into the world of business, and you find these really specific fiscal calendars that are just designed to make accounting easier. Every single one is a different tool for a different job. Because at the end of the day, for things like global trade or booking a flight, the world just needed to be on the same page. We needed a common language for time, and the Gregorian calendar, because it was so accurate and because of its history, it became that global standard. It's the reason a company in Tokyo can set up a meeting with someone in New York and nobody has to pull out a calculator. It's the silent agreement that just works. But that brings us to one last thought. Our calendar is amazingly precise, for sure. But is it perfect? I mean, people are always proposing new ideas. Calendars where every month is the same length, or where holidays always fall on the same day of the week. So I'll just leave you with this question to chew on. As we keep learning more, and as our world keeps changing, what do you think the calendar of the future is going to look like?